Hello friends, I am Dr. Kunal Kesri from GB Pant Social Science Institute, Allahabad. Today we will learn paper on urbanization and migration for the module Types of Migration. Learning objectives of this module are to understand internal migration, its classification on the basis of direction of movement, on the basis of spatial dimensions, on the basis of nature of motive, regions of migration, on the basis of duration of migration, then international migration, its classification based on forced migration, circular migration, and irregular or undocumented migration. Migration has underpinned the very history of humanities. Migration of people across administrative or political jurisdiction within a country or across the countries has been an important factor in the social change or any society. For the better understanding of the process of migration, we need to classify migration. There are two major types of migration: internal migration that occurs within a country, and international migration that takes place across international boundaries. The processes, causes, and consequences of internal migration are much different from those of international migration, as the former refers to the socio-economic spatial situations within a country, while the latter refers to the international socio-economic and political conditions, especially immigration and immigration laws and policies of these countries. Learning objectives of this module is to understand various classifications of internal and international migration. Internal migration. Internal migration is the migration of people within the country. The characteristics and patterns of a country's internal migration are vital indicators of the pace and process of its development. However, the mobility of people within national boundaries is very difficult to compare and measure. It is therefore necessary to understand the definition of internal migration very clearly. People constantly move from one place to another, and these movements are very diverse in nature. The distances covered vary from a few kilometers to several kilometers. Similarly, the duration of stay involved may also vary from a few hours to several years. A large number of movements are casual, such as commuting to and from the place of work, shopping, visiting, and traveling for business or for pleasure, etc. Such movements do not involve a sustained or a permanent change of residence, and therefore have to be distinguished from migration, which involves a change of place of usual residence or taking up of life in a new or different place. An operational definition of internal migration is a change of residence from one civil division to another or across the administrative boundary of a civil division. It may thus be said that a migrant is a mover who changes her residence from the political areas of her usual residence. It is obvious that the civil division, as a migration defining criterion, lacks uniformity, for divisions vary widely in size, shape, and length of the border. This criterion is therefore not suitable when comparisons of migration in different countries are undertaken. It is, however, have been recommended by the United Nations that the aerial unit should be as small as possible. Internal migration has been classified on the basis of various criterions which have been mentioned in the following sections. On the basis of direction of movements, migration have been classified. Within internal migration, there are four-way classification of migration according to their direction of movements within and between rural and urban areas. These are rural to rural migration, rural to urban migration, urban to rural migration, then urban to urban migration. Of all these streams, it is primarily rural to urban migration which becomes the most important, as it contributes to the transfer of labor force from the traditional agricultural sector to the urbanized industrial sector and is linked with the process of urbanization. Rural to urban migration is a response to diverse economic opportunities across space. Income differentials between rural and urban areas is one of the main reasons of this type of migration, since in developing economies like India, agriculture alone cannot sustain rural livelihoods, as Desinker argues that in India the rate of job creation and real wage increases in agriculture have slowed down. Also, urban areas attract the surplus labor of the countryside, which are always characterized by underemployment or unemployment of labor force. Other factors which pull the high income groups in the rural areas are availability of a better social infrastructure like education or health, better amenities, and quest for independence from social, cultural, religious, and family shackles. Likewise, urban to urban migration is also related to the process of concentration of population in large towns, and cities, and migration for educational purposes. However, in many developing countries like India, rural to rural migration is also of great significance, especially among the females, who move primarily due to marriage or for familial reasons. Each of these migration streams has different premises, causes, and consequences. On the basis of spatial dimensions, internal migration has been classified. Streams of internal migration with reference to the spatial dimensions are categorized into the following categories. First one is inter-district migration, that means migration within the district. Second, inter-district migration, that means migration from one district to another within the state. Third, interstate migration, that means migration from one state to another. It is important to note that migration within the district is called short distance migration. Migration within the state across the district is called medium distance migration, and migration across state boundary is called long distance migration. Internal migration occurs due to various motivations and reasons. With reference to reasons of migration, we can classify migration into the following four categories. First one is marriage migration. Second, labor migration or migration of people for work, employment, etc. And third, migration due to natural calamities. Marriage migration is by far the largest form of migration in India and is close to universal for women in rural areas. Around 217.8 million women in India move to live with their husband's family on marriage in the last decade, according to 2011 census. It is mostly rural to rural migration. A significant proportion of women migrate over short distance, which is mainly rural to rural migration. Labor migration is the migration of people with the motivation of work or employment. Several economic theories have been proposed to explain labor migration. For instance, neoclassical economic theory has tried to frame this in terms of wage differentials between the origin and destination, as well as employment conditions and migration costs. It also argues that individuals alone take the decision to migrate. On the other hand, the theory of new economics of labor migration (NELM) considers a number of conditions along with wage differentials in the labor market. According to this school of thought, the family or household, rather than the individual, is the key decision making unit on migration related matters. It views migration as a household decision taken to minimize risks by diversifying sources of family income or to overcome capital constraints on family production activities. According to Census 2011, only 10.2% people were labor migrant during the decade of 2001 to 2011, which shows the declining migrant trend from the earlier census of 2001, when this percentage was very high as 14.4%. Migration due to natural calamities is basically a kind of forced migration due to extreme environmental events like floods, tsunami, and droughts. On the basis of duration of migration, it has been classified into two groups: permanent migration and temporary migration. The migrant's intention of permanent change in residence distinguishes permanent labor migration from temporary migration. In permanent labor migration, the usual place of residence of the migrants is changed and their chances of returning home are weak. In contrast, in temporary labor migration, migrants continue to remain a usual member of the household and they tend to move circularly between the places of origin and destination. However, in China, instead of usual place of residence and duration of stay, household registration system (hukou) defines whether a person is temporary or permanent labor migrant. Temporary labor migrants refer to individuals whose place of residence differs from their place of registration. Permanent migrants, in contrast, refer to migrants who have changed their registration to the place of residence. Now coming to international migration and its classifications. International migration occurs when people cross the political boundary of their own country and enter in any other country. International migration is as old as human history. Whether it is voluntary or forced upon people by famines, conquests, and various types of persecutions. Unfortunately, because of the lack of precise information, the size and nature of such migration are not exactly known. In present times, statistics on international migration are maintained by various countries for their own national use, and hence international comparisons based on such statistics become difficult because of lack of uniformity. International migrants refer to the change of residence over national boundaries. An international migrant is someone who moves to a different country. Every year, millions of people cross international borders for a variety of reasons. Some cross borders to close business deals, while others cross for vacations. Still, other people leave their homelands with no intention of ever moving back. No study of migration is completed without a study of international migration, which has had an important bearing on the population growth of several countries such as the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, Israel, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Africa, and many more Latin American countries. International migration can be classified into following types. First, forced migration. A migratory movement in which an element of coercion exists, including threats to life and livelihood, whether arising from natural or man-made causes. For example, movements of refugees and internally displaced persons, such as people displaced by natural or environmental disasters, chemical or nuclear disasters, famine or development projects. Average annual rate of change in the number of international migrants by country or area of destination is shown in this map. The data is from 2000 to 2015. We can find the different classifications of migration density, that is average annual rate of change in percent. Darkest colors show 6% or over, and lightest color shows less than minus 4%. So we can see the variation of international migration by countries in this map. Circular migration, the fluid movement of people between countries, including temporary or long-term movements, which may be beneficial to all involved if occurring voluntarily and linked to the labor needs of countries of origin and destination. Other important type of international migration is irregular or undocumented migration. Earlier, it was also termed as illegal migration. However, now this term has been prohibited in many countries. It refers to movement that take place outside the regulatory norms of the sending, transit, and receiving countries. There is no clear or universally accepted definition of irregular migration. From the perspective of destination countries, it is entry, stay, or work in a country without the necessary authorization or documents required under immigration regulations. From the perspective of the sending country, the irregularities, for example, seen in cases in which a person crosses an international boundary without a valid passport or travel document, or does not fulfill the administrative requirements for leaving the country. There is, however, a tendency to restrict the use of the term illegal migration to cases of smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons. So far, we have learned that migration of people across administrative or political jurisdiction within a country or across the countries has been an important factor in the social change or any society. For the better understanding of the process of migration, we need to classify migration. There have been different classifications of internal and international migration on different criterions which we have gone through right now. Questions: what is the difference between internal and international migration? How many types of movements are there according to duration of migration? What are the main types of international migration? Thank you, students.